All right, one, two, three. Okay, so our group is going to talk about the impact of screen time on children and adolescents. And our group members are May, Kaylee, Talia, and myself. So to start things off, we wanted to ask, what is screen time? And we consider it as any amount of time using any type of device with a screen. So this includes things such as computers or laptops, phones, tablets, TV, gaming, and even now virtual reality. And it's also a good thing to note that with the advancement of technology, screen time is expected to rise as well. So at this point, it's only going to increase with today's society. And then moving on with screen time, it's also good to note that it's more prominent in areas with more access to technology. This is mainly for developed countries because, of course, if they have the more resources to utilize this advanced technology with screens, then obviously the problem will be more common in those areas. And we also listed a couple of general pros and cons to screen time. So some pros with this is that you can use it a lot for education-based purposes, including education apps, remote learning, as well as the convenience of using um, technology screens. This is more important, especially with the current pandemic, that we're able to move from the in-person classroom setting to the remote learning setting as seen with our Zoom conferences. And of course, we also found some cons to using screen time, which would include things such as entertainment, the eye strain, and decreased attention span, and overall kind of like a social pressure to keep up with the Joneses because again, noting that it's more prominent in developed countries that you do need an actual device to you to basically get out the screen time. It's kind of like that social mindset that you have to continuously update your said device. And it's kind of noted that it's gotten to the point that some phones are even costing over $1,000. So yeah.
Okay, so a little bit about the prevalence of screen time for children and adolescents. The prevalence of digital media and the use of screens is extremely common. Approximately 98% of children in the United States live in a home with an internet connected device. And according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, children and adolescents spend time watching a variety of screens, which includes smartphones, tablets, gaming consoles, televisions, as well as computers. But what is the recommended guideline for screen time? Screen time guidelines by age, as recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the World Health Organization, is as follows. The guideline states that infants under the age of 18 months should have no screen time, with the exception of video chatting with family, such as their grandparents. The guidelines for toddlers, which are children aged 18 to 24 months, is that little to no screen time is recommended. If they do get screen time, children in this age group should be co-watching, that is, with a parent or a guardian, and should include high quality educational content and a limit total exposure to less than 1 hour. This is a very critical developmental period for children in this age group. Thus, screen time should be kept at a minimum. Preschoolers or 3 to 5-year-olds have a guideline for up to 1 hour of screen time, but it is important to note that the use of screens should not be used as a calming nor as a distracting device. The screen time guidelines for elementary school age children, which includes 6 to 10-year-olds, is up to 1.5 hours per day. Children in this age group should have consistent limits on screen time and should refrain from making screen time a habit. So for middle-aged school children, which includes 11 to 13-year-olds, the guideline states they are able to have up to 2 hours a day of screen time, but should practice balance. Although these guidelines are put into place, the actual incidence of screen time for children and adolescents is astonishing. According to a study by Dr. Madigan and Associates titled Association Between Screen Time and Children's Performance of a Developmental Screening Test, found that the average screen time of a child aged 0 to 4 years old was 2 hours of screen time per day. And according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, 8 to 12-year-olds average 4 to 6 hours of screen time per day, while teenagers aged above 12 years old viewed up to 9 hours of screen time per day. A systematic review in which 24 publications were included showed that health and developmental effects of screen time are far reaching when exposure occurs during the critical period of neural and health behavior. Excess screen time in early childhood was found to adversely affect health as well as developmental outcomes.
So what's the impact of screen time on babies and developing child? Well, here today we're going to talk about the three aspects that we found to be affected by screen time. First is the physical development, which includes sensory development, fine motor development, and vision or health or eye health. The second is social and emotional development, which inhibits social skills and healthy habit formation and lack of regulating skills or behavioral issues. And lastly is the physiological or chemical dependency before and after screen time effects. So what do I mean by it affecting the fine motor skills? Well, for a developing child, it is crucial that they learn and experience things not just in a two-dimensional type media, but also to apply and master that new learned skill in a three-dimensional life experience. A good example is a child watching Sesame Street or one of those educational DVDs released by Leapfrog. Yes, a child could learn how to recognize and say the different alphabets or words, but the child would need to learn how to first hold a crayon before he's able to write letters or his name. Sensory motor, another thing that screen time affects, is a child's sensory motor. When a child is exposed to watching a lot of TV, playing video games, or just being in front of screens for longer than the recommended screen time, then this reduces multimodal mental imagery. The images that they see on a TV is what's called a ready-made visual image. Thus, this hinders the child in creating or generating their own visual images. Screen time sensory typically only dominates two modalities, visual and auditory, thus causing the rest, such as tactile, proprioceptive, and visceral receptors to suffer during development. And lastly, vision or eye health. So the eyes are also another thing that affects during excessive screen time. The constant straining and staring can cause what's called computer vision syndrome, which includes straining dry eyes, blurry vision, and sometimes headaches. The blue light and constant movement on a screen causes eye strain, and since screens are almost always at a constant distance, then the eyes aren't focusing and refocusing as they're intended to do, which in turn can lead to myopia. Social and emotional development is another thing that's affected by screen time. So what do I mean about social and emotional development? Here we're going to talk about the decrease in face-to-face interaction with other human beings. So all the technological advancement that we've accomplished to enhance communication has culminated into an opposite effect of what we intended. Currently, parents utilize these devices as substitute babysitters or placeholders for their attention. Parents that are mentally present is essential since it prevents deficit on their social and emotional development. The unhealthy habits are associated to a sedentary life. So this creates bad sleeping habits or lack thereof. It creates propensity to constantly snack and also bad hygiene. So smartphones, TVs, and tablets have serious implications to infants and or toddlers' sleeping habits, which is essential for brain development. Another thing that screen time affects is poor self-regulation skills, overstimulation, and poor mental health. These are some of the behavioral issues related to exposure to too much media. This could mean poor cognitive skills, aggression, depression, anxiety, and poor self-esteem. So another thing that screen time affects in babies and developing child is their physiological and chemical dependency. And what this means is screen time desensitizes the brain's reward system called dopamine, the feel-good chemical. So especially for children who uses the gaming devices, they have an overuse of these reward pathways. They become less sensitive and more stimulation is needed to experience such pleasure. Also, the attentional process of can be significantly altered due to the release of the norepinephrine and cortisol after psychological stress when they um, play such a video game. So this in turn causes what's called screen rage when parents or their caregivers um, take away their devices. And what do I mean by screen rage? Well, screen rage means the screen time that triggers the release of the dopamine, which the neurotransmitter that makes us feel good when the kids associate that pleasure with the screen time and that's taken away, then the kids throw tantrums or, like I said, the screen rage. Next slide.
Nursing implications. Interventions aimed at reducing screen time in adolescents can help healthcare professionals, patients, and families respond to the growing problem of unhealthy media use. By assessing screen time, nurses can connect families with resources, encourage open discussions, and gain a better understanding of their patients' health. Empowering youth to positively engage in media can mitigate health complications as patients grow into adulthood. To promote child development and health in this digital age, nurses and other healthcare providers should advise parents and caregivers of children on the proper use of screen time. Specific recommendations include reducing screen time. As Talia mentioned previously, it's important to follow the screen time guidelines according to the child's age. Nurses should advise parents that screen time for children 2 years old and younger is not recommended. For children ages 2 to 5 years, parents should minimize regular or routine screen time to less than 1 hour per day. Children ages 6 to 10 should not have more than 1.5 hours of screen time per day, and children's ages 11 to 13 should not have more than 2 hours of screen time per day. Parents should make sure that sedentary screen time does not play a routine or major part of childcare for children younger than age 5. Parents should maintain screen-free times daily, particularly for book sharing and family meals. And due to melatonin suppressing effects, parents should have children avoid screens for at least 1 hour before bedtime. Another recommendation is to diminish the risks associated with screen time by being engaged and present when children are using screens and co-view with children whenever possible. Nurses should advise parents to be mindful of the content children are taking in and prioritize age-appropriate educational and interactive programming. Encourage parents to practice parenting strategies that teach limit setting, calming, and self-regulation. As a family, be aware of the use of screen time by implementing a self-assessment of current screen habits, develop a family media plan accordingly for where, how, and when screens may and may not be used. Parents should help children question and recognize stereotyping, advertising messages, and other problematic content. Parents can remind themselves that excessive screen time means lost opportunities for learning and teaching. They should remember that no evidence exists to support introducing technology to children at an early age. Lastly, adults should exemplify healthy screen use by choosing healthy alternative activities such as outdoor play, reading, and hands-on creative activities. They can turn their devices off at home and during family time, and they can work to avoid background television and turn off screens when not in use. Next slide. These are some questions to consider asking families with young children in order to assess their screen use. Number 1, what kind of screens are in your home? For example, are there TVs, tablets, computers, or smartphones? And which does your child use? Number 2, is watching TV or programs and movies on other devices a shared family activity and a common way to relax? How often is a screen on in the background, even when no one is really watching? Does anyone in the family use screens during meal times? Number 4, what do you watch with your child? What does your child watch alone? Number 5, do you encourage or discourage conversation with your child while you're using screens? Number 6, do you ever watch adult or commercial programming with your child, and how often? Number 7, does your child use screens while you do chores around the house, and how often? Number 8, are there any screen-based activities in your child's daycare program? Do you know how much these are used? Number 9, does your child use any kind of screen before bedtime? How long before bedtime? Is there a TV or computer in your child's bedroom? Does your child take mobile devices into the bedroom? And number 10, does your family have rules or guidelines for screen use that everybody understands and shares? And next slide. And these are our references. And that's the end.